This is my true story. I spent my life loving one woman, giving her everything I could, and building a future I thought would last. Our anniversary dinner was supposed to be a moment of joy, a reminder of the years we survived together. Instead, it became the night she chose to humiliate me in front of everyone, family, friends, and strangers. She mocked me, called me old, called me boring, laughed as others joined her. I sat silent, but I was not weak. I exposed her. Before I share how, tell me where you're watching from and subscribe so my story can reach more people. I gave my wife everything across decades of marriage. I worked long hours, often through the night, to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. I carried the weight of every bill, every struggle, and every crisis, while making sure she never lacked what she wanted. When she was sick, I sat by her side. When she felt weak, I held her up. When she wanted more from life, I pushed myself harder so she could have it. I never kept money for myself, never spent time chasing my own interests, because in my mind, love meant sacrifice. I told myself that as long as she was happy, the hardships I carried were worth it. Together, we raised children, built a home, and grew old side by side. I believed our marriage was strong because of the years behind it, because of the sweat, the patience, and the loyalty I gave every single day. I thought love was proven not in words, but in action. And I showed her my love in every sacrifice I made. I remembered anniversaries. I remembered birthdays. I remembered the small things that mattered to her, even when she stopped noticing what mattered to me. Over the years, when people drifted apart, I told myself we were different. I believed she still respected the bond we shared, because how could a person not value decades of loyalty? I looked forward to our anniversary dinners each year, not because of the food or the setting, but because they symbolized what we had built together. Each dinner reminded me of our vows, our past, and our endurance through the hard times. I had planned the latest one with the same hope. I chose the restaurant carefully, invited family and friends, and even prepared a small surprise gift that I thought would bring a smile to her face. I believed this dinner would once again confirm that despite our age, despite the years gone by, our love remained intact. I convinced myself that whatever distance I had felt between us lately was just the effect of time, not a real fracture. I sat at that table believing we were still partners, believing that after all the storms, we had survived together. For me, the anniversary dinner was meant to be a moment of celebration, a moment to look back proudly at a life built with hard work and love. I thought she would feel the same, that she would look at me with gratitude and respect for everything I had done. I thought she would remember the man who never let her down. But I was wrong, and the devotion I carried silently for decades was about to be repaid with humiliation in front of everyone we knew. The restaurant was full that evening. Family filled one side of the room, friends filled the other, and even some neighbors had come to celebrate what they thought was a happy occasion. The air carried laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the sound of music played quietly in the background. I had planned everything carefully, making sure she would feel special, because anniversaries were not just about survival, they were about recognition. I handed her the small gift I had prepared, something thoughtful, not expensive, but meaningful to remind her of our journey together. I spoke words of gratitude, thanking her for the years we had shared, reminding her of how much she still meant to me. I expected kindness in return, maybe even a smile, maybe even a word of appreciation. Instead, she chose that very moment to cut me down in front of everyone. She laughed, not in joy, but in mockery. She called me old, said I was boring, said life with me had become irrelevant. Her words were sharp, her tone cruel, and the worst part was the way she looked around the room after she said them, inviting the crowd to laugh with her. And they did. Some chuckled nervously, others outright laughed, as if my humiliation was entertainment. I sat there frozen, staring at the woman I had given everything to, hearing her tear apart my dignity as if it meant nothing. My children looked away, embarrassed, not knowing what to do. Friends tried to smile through the awkwardness, but the damage was already done. The celebration I had planned turned into a stage for my public shaming. My gift, the words I spoke, the respect I carried, All of it was thrown back at me with her cruel laughter. I tried to hold my composure, tried not to let the tears rise in my eyes, but inside I was breaking. In that single moment, she turned decades of loyalty into a joke. I felt smaller than I had ever felt in my life, as though every sacrifice, every long night, every dream I had set aside for her was meaningless. I realized then that she did not see me as her partner anymore. She saw me as a target, an old man she could humiliate to make herself feel powerful. That dinner, meant to celebrate our life, became the night I lost all respect for her. It was the night I understood that humiliation can cut deeper than betrayal, because betrayal can be hidden, but humiliation is public. It lives in the eyes of everyone who saw it, and it cannot be taken back. Her words did not fade after she spoke them. They hung in the air, heavy and sharp, cutting deeper each time I replayed them in my mind. I sat there in silence, my hands resting on the table, my body stiff, my face trying to remain calm, while my heart shattered inside me. Every eye in the room had turned toward me, some filled with pity, some filled with awkward amusement, and others filled with disbelief. But none of them mattered as much as hers. She looked at me not with love, not with respect, but with contempt. I had carried this woman through sickness and health, through poverty and struggle, through decades of life where I gave more of myself than I thought possible, and she repaid me with cruelty in front of everyone. I felt the sting of humiliation like fire on my skin, and I swallowed hard, trying not to break down in front of the same people who once praised me as a loyal husband. My pride, something I had built over years of sacrifice and hard work, crumbled in an instant. The gift I had placed in front of her lay unopened, pushed aside as if it were meaningless. The words I had spoken with sincerity were mocked as if they carried no weight. My dignity had been stripped away by the very person I had trusted most in the world. The crushing blow was not just her laughter, not just her words, but the realization that she chose that exact moment, our anniversary dinner, the night meant to honor what we had built, to humiliate me. She could have spoken her frustrations in private. She could have told me her feelings when no one else was around. But she wanted an audience. She wanted to tear me down in front of others, to show her power at my expense. That was the part that broke me most. I sat there with tears burning behind my eyes, refusing to let them fall, because I knew if I showed weakness, she would feel victorious. In that moment, pain turned into something else inside me. Humiliation burned, but beneath it, something colder began to rise. It was not rage that would explode into shouting or violence. It was not despair that would make me collapse. It was resolve. A steady voice in my heart telling me that this moment, though it hurt more than anything I had ever endured, would not be the end of me. She thought she had won. She thought her words had silenced me. But what she did not know was that I carried a secret, and one day soon I would use it to destroy the image she tried to build by tearing me down. The crushing blow nearly broke me, but it also gave me clarity. I finally saw her not as my wife, not as my partner, but as the person who had chosen lies and cruelty over love and respect. And from that clarity, I began to prepare for what would come next. What she did not know that night was that I already carried the proof of who she truly was. Months before the anniversary dinner, I had stumbled upon her phone left unlocked on the counter. I had no intention of invading her privacy, but when the screen lit up, a message preview caught my eye. It was not from a friend or family member. It was from a man I did not know. The words were not casual. They were intimate, full of promises that no married woman should ever receive. My chest tightened as I picked up the phone, and what I saw inside confirmed my worst fears. There were dozens of messages, long conversations where she spoke about me in cruel ways, mocking my age, my habits, my devotion, as if loyalty was a weakness. She told him she felt alive with him, told him how she laughed at me behind my back, told him things that cut me deeper than any insult ever had. They arranged meetings, late nights when she said she was running errands, afternoons when she claimed she was with friends. He told her he loved her, and she told him she loved him back. And worst of all, there were photos too, nothing explicit, but enough to prove that their relationship went far beyond words. I saved everything. I took screenshots, I copied the messages, I stored them in a place she could not reach. At first, I did not know what to do with them. I thought about confronting her directly, but then I pictured the denial, the excuses, the endless arguments that would only leave me more broken. I thought about telling the family, but I did not want to bring shame before I was ready. So I stayed silent, carrying the secret like a burden, waiting for the right time. Each day, I watched her live comfortably, smiling as though she had done nothing wrong, and inside me the anger grew heavier. I carried that evidence in my pocket like a hidden weapon, unsure when or how I would use it, but certain that one day it would be unleashed. She thought she had fooled me, that her lies were safe, that her phone was only a tool for laughter and secrets. But I had seen everything, and I could not forget it. The texts replayed in my mind, the words echoing in my ears, the photos burned into my memory. I carried that secret into every meal, every conversation, every night I lay awake beside her. It poisoned me, but it also strengthened me because I knew the truth was on my side. When she humiliated me at the anniversary dinner, mocking me in front of everyone, she gave me the stage I needed. She thought she was the one in control, but she had already handed me the rope that would one day expose her lies. The secret I carried was no longer just a burden. It was my answer, my weapon, my justice waiting for the right moment to strike. That night after the dinner, when the guests had left and the house was quiet, I sat alone in the living room. The humiliation replayed over and over in my mind, her words cutting me again and again, her laughter ringing in my ears. For years I had sacrificed, worked, and remained loyal, only to be mocked like a fool in front of family and friends. Yet as painful as it was, I did not allow the anger to control me. Instead, I sat in silence, staring at the evidence I had collected on my phone, scrolling through the screenshots of her conversations with another man. Each word reminded me of the betrayal, but now those words gave me clarity. I realized that love between us had died long ago. Whatever bond we once shared had been replaced with lies, secrecy, and contempt. She no longer respected me as a husband, no longer cared for me as a partner, and no longer honored the years I had given her. My silence that night was not weakness, it was preparation. I understood that I had been given a choice. I could confront her then and there, argue, demand answers, and lose myself in her excuses. Or I could remain calm, hold my ground, and wait for the moment when the truth would cut her deeper than her words had cut me. The more I thought about it, the more certain I became. Her public humiliation of me had set the stage for her own downfall. She wanted an audience to laugh at me, and she had chosen our anniversary as the night to do it. I decided then that the same stage would be used to expose her. If she wanted the crowd, I would give her the crowd. But the show would not be her mockery of me. It would be the truth of who she was. In the silence of that night, I reflected on all the years I had wasted protecting her image. I thought of the sacrifices, the birthdays remembered, the anniversaries planned, the nights I worked to make sure she was comfortable. All of it had been thrown back at me. But instead of letting bitterness destroy me, I sharpened it into resolve. I would not scream, I would not beg, I would not fight. I would wait for the perfect time. And when that time came, she would feel the same sting of humiliation she had forced upon me, but hers would be worse, because hers would come with the undeniable proof of her betrayal. That night of silence became my turning point. I was no longer just a broken man. I was a man preparing justice. The decision came to me clearly, without hesitation, like a voice inside that refused to be ignored. I had carried the evidence for months, lived with the weight of betrayal, and endured the sting of humiliation. That night at the anniversary dinner, when she mocked me in front of family and friends, she gave me the signal. I would no longer stay silent. I would no longer carry her secret while she laughed at me. I chose not to argue with her that evening, because arguments are just words, and words can be twisted. I chose not to confront her in private, because private fights can be hidden and denied. If she had the courage to humiliate me in public, then I would have the courage to expose her in public. I thought about the faces at that dinner, the people who had laughed nervously when she mocked me. the ones who looked at me with pity as I sat there in silence. They believed her version of the story. They believed I was a man growing old and irrelevant, but they did not know the truth. They did not know that the woman laughing at me had been giving herself to another man behind my back. I realized my revenge did not need anger. It needed precision. It needed the proof I already carried in my pocket. The phone in my hand was no longer just a device. It was a weapon, one she had given me unknowingly through her carelessness. Each screenshot, each message, each photograph was a blade that would cut through her lies. I decided that the next time she tried to make me the fool in front of others, I would no longer stay quiet. I would rise, I would stand, and I would show them who the real fool was. In that moment, I felt calm. The humiliation that had burned me hours earlier turned into strength. My hands stopped trembling, my heart grew steady, and I understood exactly what needed to be done. She thought I was weak, that my silence meant defeat, but she was wrong. My silence was patience, and patience is stronger than rage. I had chosen my path, and I would not turn back. The decision to strike was final. The next gathering came not long after. Another dinner where family and friends filled the room, expecting another evening of laughter and celebration. I sat quietly at first, watching her move from table to table, smiling, pretending to be the perfect wife while I carried the truth in my pocket. She had no idea what was about to happen. She believed she still held power over me, that her mockery from the anniversary dinner had left me broken and silent. But she was wrong. When the chatter grew loud and the glasses clinked, I stood up slowly, letting the room fall into silence. Everyone turned to look at me, expecting maybe a speech or some words of thanks. My wife looked at me too, her smile fading as she realized something was different. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, holding it steady in my hand. My voice was calm, not angry, not loud, but firm. I told them all that since she enjoyed making a show out of me, it was only fair that I returned the favor. Only this time, the show would not be my humiliation, but hers. With that, I connected my phone to the screen at the front of the room, the one meant for family photos and memories. And in an instant, her text messages to another man lit up the wall for everyone to see. The room fell dead silent as her words appeared, line after line, messages filled with betrayal and cruelty. They saw the way she mocked me behind my back, calling me old, boring, and useless. They saw her promises to another man, her declarations of love, her arrangements for secret meetings. They saw the photos she had sent, proof that this was not just a game, but an affair she had carried for months. Gasps filled the room. Some covered their mouths, others shook their heads, and whispers spread like wildfire. My wife's face went pale, her body stiff, her hands trembling as she stared at the wall that exposed her lies. She tried to move, tried to stop me, but it was too late. The evidence was undeniable, every word written by her own hand, every photo taken by her own choice. The same people who had laughed when she mocked me now sat in silence, their laughter replaced with shame and disbelief. She had wanted the spotlight that night at the anniversary dinner, but now the spotlight burned her instead. I stood tall, my voice steady, and I said nothing more, because the truth spoke louder than anything I could have added. Her show had ended, and mine had just begun. The moment the first messages appeared on the screen, the entire room shifted. What had begun as laughter and conversation turned into silence so heavy that every breath could be heard. My wife stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing without sound, her eyes wide with shock as her own words betrayed her. The guests stared, some whispering in disbelief, others shaking their heads, and some too stunned to react at all. The family members who had always praised her sat in silence, their faces pale, their respect shattered in an instant. The same people who had laughed at her jokes when she mocked me now avoided her eyes, ashamed to have been part of her cruelty. She reached for me, as if to stop me, but I stepped back and let the screen continue its work. The text scrolled, one after another, her promises of love to another man, her mocking words about me, her arrangements for meetings. Each line cut her down further, stripping away the image she had built for herself over the years. My wife, who had humiliated me on the night meant to celebrate our love, now stood humiliated in front of everyone she had fooled. Friends whispered to one another. Families turned away. Children who had looked up to her as an example sat confused and ashamed. The man she wrote to was named in the texts, and though he was not present, his name carried across the room like a curse, his involvement now no longer hidden. My wife tried to speak, tried to explain, but the proof was too strong. Every denial collapsed under the weight of her own words. Her body trembled, her hands shook, and tears filled her eyes, but they did not move anyone. The sympathy she might have once received was gone, replaced by disgust and anger. The night that had once been hers to control now belonged to me, and more importantly, it belonged to the truth. The guests looked at me differently now. Some nodded in silence, others gave small gestures of support, and I felt my dignity return piece by piece. I had not shouted, I had not cursed, I had not begged. I had simply revealed what was already there, and it was enough to destroy the lies she lived in. The fallout was complete. The woman who had mocked me was now the one mocked in whispers. The one who had humiliated me was now drowning in her own disgrace. And I stood calm because justice had finally been served. The collapse of her lies happened right there in front of everyone, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Once the first wave of shock settled, the room turned cold toward her. People who once praised her now avoided her, shaking their heads in disgust. Some stood up and left immediately, unwilling to sit at the same table with someone who could betray her husband so deeply and so openly. Others whispered harshly about the name of the man in her messages, realizing this was not just a mistake, but a long and planned affair. My wife tried to deny it at first, her voice breaking as she claimed the words were taken out of context, that the photos were not what they seemed. But every excuse collapsed the moment the next message appeared on the screen. Each line confirmed what I already knew. Each image sealed her guilt. She grew desperate, her face red, her tears falling, her hands reaching toward anyone who would listen. But no one did. The guests sat back, their arms crossed, their eyes narrowed, unwilling to let her twist the truth. She begged some to believe her, but they turned away. She called out to family, but they shook their heads in disappointment. In that moment, the woman who once stood tall with pride, who once laughed at me in front of everyone, was left small and powerless. Her false image, the one she had carefully kept for years, crumbled in a single evening. Even the children who once adored her could not look at her the same. The shame spread through the room like fire, leaving nothing of her reputation intact. People began leaving in groups, their voices filled with anger and gossip, carrying her disgrace beyond those four walls into the community where it would live forever. By the end, only silence remained, a silence that weighed heavier than any insult she had ever thrown at me. She sat slumped in her chair, pale, broken, and alone, while I stood calm, my dignity restored. The night she intended to humiliate me became the night her lies collapsed completely. When it was over, I did not stay to comfort her, and I did not stay to argue with anyone. I had done what I needed to do, and the rest was no longer mine to carry. I stood up, pushed in my chair, and walked out of that room with my head held high. I felt no need to raise my voice, no need to explain, because the evidence had spoken for me. For months I had carried the weight of her betrayal, the pain of her laughter, and the shame of being mocked by the very woman I had loved for decades. That night, I laid it all down. My dignity, the same dignity she tried to strip from me, returned the moment the truth was revealed. I left her sitting there in front of the very people who once respected her, and now could no longer look at her without disgust. She tried to humiliate me on the day that was supposed to honor our love, but in the end, she was the one exposed. I did not scream. I did not beg her to stop. I did not crumble. I stood, I showed the truth, and I walked away, calm. That was my justice. I knew her life would never be the same. Wherever she went, people would remember what they saw on that screen. She could never erase those messages, never undo the betrayal, never rebuild the image she destroyed herself. And as for me, I found peace. Not because the years of pain were gone, but because I proved that silence is not weakness. Silence, when used with patience, can be the sharpest weapon of all. My final thought is simple. She tried to shame me on the day of our love, but I left her exposed in the ashes of her own lies, and I walked away with my dignity intact.